Good morning. We are reading chapter 25 of Monster Blood 2. This is the conclusion. And currently, Fluffy is huge. And Evan is covered in monster blood. So let's see what happens. Evan shut his eyes as the heavy green gunk rolled over his head. He shot his arms out, trying to push it away. As it swept over him, he fell to his knees, kicking and thrashing. It forced him down to the floor. "I'm stuck inside," he thought. Stuck inside. He felt his hands grab his ankles. The hands tugged hard. He began to slide over the floor, over the thick layer of monster blood. "I've got you," he heard Andy cry. "I've got you out." He opened his eyes. He saw her pulling him, tugging him out of the thick green gunk by the ankles. It clung to his clothes and his skin, but he was out. "Thanks," he murmured weakly. He climbed shakily to his feet. He could hear Conan screaming and crying back in the classroom. There was still time to save him, Evan realized. He pulled a hunk of monster blood off the quivering green mound and jammed it into his mouth. "I'm going to be sick," Andy groaned, holding her stomach. Evan swallowed and reached for another mouthful. "It doesn't taste bad," he told her. "A little lemony." "Don't eat too much," she cried, half covering her eyes as she watched him swallow another mouthful. "I have to grow big enough so that Cuddles is a hamster size compared to me," Evan said. He grabbed another hunk. He could already feel himself start to grow. His head was already over the top of the lockers. Back in the classroom, Conan let out another terrified wail. "Let's go," Evan boomed. His voice thundered deeply in his new, larger body. He could feel himself growing taller. He had to lower his head to get through the classroom door. Kids and teachers moved out of the way, crying out their surprise and alarm. He crossed the room, passed by Mr. Murphy, and stepped up to the giant hamster. "I'm as big as Cuddles," Evan called down to Andy. He reached out and lifted Conan from Cuddles' paws. Cuddles reached out to take Conan back, but Evan lowered him gently to the floor. "Help me, help me!" Conan ran bawling from the room. Evan turned to face the hamster. They stared at each other, eye to eye. Cuddles' huge pink nose twitched. He sniffed Evan, inhaling so hard that Evan was nearly sucked forward. "Keep growing," he urged himself. "I've got to keep growing." Cuddles eyed him warily, still sniffing. His watery black eyes stared hard, as if trying to figure out if Evan was friend or foe. "Don't you remember me, Cuddles?" Evan said softly. "Remember? I'm the one who fed you after school every day." "Keep growing," he silently urged himself. "Why aren't I growing any taller?" Down below he could see Andy. Mr. Murphy and the others huddled against the far wall, staring up at the two giants in hushed horror. "Keep growing, keep growing." There's no way he could pick Cuddles up now, Evan realized. They were exactly the same height, and Cuddles outweighed him by at least a ton. "Keep growing. What's wrong, Andy?" Evan called down to her in a trembling voice. "I ate tons of the stuff. Why did I stop growing?" "I don't know," she called up to him. Her voice sounded as tiny as a mouse squeak. Then, as Evan turned back to face Cuddles, the hamster reached out and grabbed his wrist with both paws. Ow! Evan cried as the hamster tried to lift him off the floor. Gazing up, he saw the gaping hamster's mouth open. The sharp white teeth emerged. Evan squirmed desperately, pulling himself loose. Then he wrapped both arms around the hamster's middle. They started to wrestle. Evan fought hard, but the hamster overpowered him. Cuddles rolled Evan onto his back on the floor. Evan spun quickly away, climbed to his feet, and pulled the hamster down. The two giants wrestled over the floor and surrounded by the shrill of screams of teachers and kids. Grow bigger, grow bigger now, Evan pleaded. But it was too late. He saw the hamster lowered his hot, furry body over him. Evan could feel the creature's booming heartbeat as it pressed him to the floor. Then his teeth rose up over Evan's head. The hamster's mouth opened wide. The teeth swung down. A wave of hot, sour hamster breath blew down over Evan. He shut his eyes. Sorry, he murmured to Annie. He held his breath and waited for the teeth to clamp down. Oh no, what is going to happen? Evan heard a pop, like the sound of a cork flying off a bottle. Still sprawled on his back on the floor, Evan opened his eyes. Huh? Cuddles had disappeared, vanished. Evan stared up at the startled faces of kids and teachers against the wall. What? Where's Cuddles? He stammered. Andy stood frozen like a statue, her mouth open. Evan slowly realized that she was nearly as big as he was. In fact, everyone was about his size. He pulled himself up to a sitting position. Hey, I'm back to my normal size, he cried. He shook his head hard as if trying to shake away his close call with the giant hamster. There's Cuddles, Andy cried, pointing. Evan turned to see Cuddles huddled against the wall. He's a little hamster again, Evan exclaimed happily. He took 3 quick steps, bent down, grabbed Cuddles between his hands. Gotcha! Holding the hamster in front of him, he turned back to Andy and the others. What happened? Why did we shrink back? Andy was studying the blue monster bloodhead. Suddenly, she tossed back her black hair, her brown eyes lit up, and she started to laugh. It's the expiration date, she cried happily. The expiration on the can. It's today. The monster blood stops working today. The magic has worn out. Evan let out a whoop of joy. Mr. Murphy, a wide grin on his face, hurried over, put his arm around Evan's shoulder. Fine job, Evan, fine job, he exclaimed. You saved the school. I'm proud of you. Thanks, Mr. Murphy, Evan replied awkwardly. You'll never make the basketball player now that you're short again, Mr. Murphy said, smiling. But that was quite a good match with Cuddles. Have you ever thought of trying out for the wrestling team? Andy came to Evan's house for dinner that night. He greeted her at the door, eager to tell her how all the kids had apologized for not believing him about the monster blood. But before he could say anything, she held up a large brown envelope and grinned at him. What's that? He asked, following her into the living room. It's a present from my parents sent me from Europe, she replied, her grin growing wider. You won't believe what it is. She started to pull open the envelope, but the front door bell rang. Evan hurried to see who it was. Mr. Murphy, he cried in surprise. Hi, Evan, the teacher said, his round body nearly filling the entire front stoop. Hope I'm not interrupting your dinner. No, Evan replied. Want to come in? No, thanks, Mr. Murphy replied. His expression turned solemn. I came by because I thought you should have some sort of reward, Evan. You were a real hero at school. Not really, Evan said awkwardly. He could feel his face growing hot and knew he was blushing. What kind of reward? Evan wondered, staring back at the teacher. A cash reward? Mr. Murphy raised the hamster cage into Evan's view. I've decided to reward you with Cuddles, the teacher said. I know how fond of him you are." "No, please," Evan started to plead. "It's a small token," Mr. Murphy said, "to show how grateful I am. How grateful we all are. No, please, no." But before Evan realized it, the hamster cage was in his hand, and Mr. Murphy was waddling back down the driveway to his car. "He gave you cuddles?" Andy asked as Evan returned to the living room carrying the cage. He set it down on the coffee table. "It's my reward," Evan told her, rolling his eyes. "Do you believe it?" "Well, you won't believe this," Andy declared. "Look what my parents found in Europe." She reached into the envelope and pulled out a blue plastic can. "It's monster blood." "Oh, no," Evan wailed. "They wrote that they remembered how much fun I had with the old can," Andy said, holding up the blue container. "So when they saw this can in a toy store in Germany, they decided to send me a new one." Evan's eyes went wide with fear. You're not going to open it?" he demanded wearily. "Already did," Andy replied. "Just take a look. But I'm not going to use it. Really, I promise." Evan started to say something, but he was interrupted by his mother's call from the kitchen. "Dinner time, you two. Wash your hands. Come to the table." Andy set the can of monster blood down on the desk in the corner. They obediently hurried to wash their hands. They had a lively dinner. There was lots of talk about. They laughed and joked about all that had happened at school. It was easy to laugh about it now that it was all over. After dinner, Evan and Andy returned to the living room and was the first to see that the door to the hamster cage was wide open. The cage was empty. Evan was the one who spotted Cuddles on the desk. "Cuddles, what are you eating?" he cried. "What are you eating?" Oh my goodness. That is a good ending. I hope you enjoyed Monster Blood 2. It was amazing. I just thought I'd mention that I am the horror author of Vampire Juice. This is the blurb for my book. Amanda and Sean stumble upon a mysterious can of juice while searching for Halloween costumes at a local store. Despite being kicked out by the sales clerk, they become obsessed with uncovering the truth behind the strange drink. With the help from some local bullies, they sneak back into the store through a crypt in the graveyard, only to find themselves in the midst of a spine-chilling adventure. Okay, and this is one of my first reviews. Vampire Juice is a teen market horror that is fast-paced and character-driven. In this novella, we follow two teens who are set up at the precipice of a bubbling romance and get thrusted into a very sinister plot that they didn't expect to get involved in. While searching for a Halloween costume, the two teens wander into an off-limits area of a store and find a very mysterious can marked Vampire Juice. That in itself is not odd. What is odd is how venomously the clerk protects the can. They devise a plot involving a couple of neighbor bullies to steal the can and get answers. Thus, they get thrusted into a whirlwind journey that they are not sure they will make it out alive. I found this to be very interesting, and yes, it's definitely written for a younger crowd, but that does not make it unenjoyable for adults. I was thoroughly enjoying the more simplistic story that was just all about the fun of the story. It actually made me very nostalgic for several of the horror books I started with as a child. It had just enough darkness to really set the tone for the book, while not being overly adult. Ultimately, while written for mid-teens, this was an enjoyable story for all ages. So, if that's something you're interested in, check out my link in the bio. Vampire Juice. Thanks for watching.